Welcome back to Storytime. In today's episode, we're going to be continuing our summertime theme with the prompt, as a child, you spent many summers at a relative's cabin playing with a girl in the woods. You realized that she was imaginary years later. You returned to the cabin as an adult, finding her shoes where neither you nor a relative could have put them. Things get stranger as you continue. Today's story is brought to you by OneSidedDice. It was a warm, windless August afternoon in the Adirondacks, just like it always was when I was young and my family would spend a couple of summer weeks in the cabin. Turning off the highway onto the ribbon of faded asphalt that ran through the village was like going back in time. But the feeling was spoiled immediately by a new strip mall and its shiny monstrosity of a BP gas station, Whole Foods store, cake pop store, and upscale Vietnamese restaurant. Vietnam? Get real, I thought as we sped past. The rutted gravel track from the road to the cabin was the same as ever, at least. I drove slowly through the dappled shadows, enjoying the smell of the woods and the sound of the small birds through the open windows. The cabin itself was a bit of a letdown. Seen for the first time in ages, it seemed so much smaller than I remembered. Clearly, Dad hadn't taken care of it for several years. I parked my car and slumped back in disappointment. When I was a kid, the cabin was the coolest. Looking at it with new eyes and a lot more life experience, it wasn't very cool at all. Honestly, it was kind of crappy. My sister and I had finally sold off our parents' other properties and belongings. The cabin was all that was left. I wish now that I'd just sold it and never looked back, like Anita had wanted. I kicked my way through waist-high meadow grass and unlocked the door. It was dim and musty smelling inside. I pushed through the decorative curtains, one of Mom's few contributions to the place, and walked through the unused family room and the short hallway to the bathroom. It had been a long drive. Next, I walked on down the hall to the small room where Anita and I had slept on those family trips. The wood paneling, 1950s era bunk bed and dresser and wooden camp chairs were still there, more worn than I had expected. On a half-remembered impulse, I tapped the floorboard at the foot of the bunks with my boot. Bump, 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 bonk. That was the one. I don't know what I expected to find in my old hiding spot. Vintage Star Wars figures, an antique musket ball, a hawk feather, all the things a young boy would treasure. I was not prepared for the shoes. I felt dizzy and sat down hard on the bare wood floor. These were the shoes that Ella would wear. Parents had a cabin nearby and always seemed to be there at the same time as us. I'd run away from bossy Anita whenever I could roam the woods and streams with Ella. She was cool, and my age, and wore white Vans with colorful paint splatters on them. The shoes in my spot weren't just like hers, they were hers. But Ella was just a friend I'd made up. That's what everybody told me after I mentioned her, after being gone a little too long one day. Dad pointed out that there were no other cabins for miles around, and Anita teased me mercilessly. "Where's your girlfriend? Did she go back to Canada?" I rolled my eyes just thinking about it. I never saw Ella after that day, and I guessed that they were right until now. I'd never told anybody what Ella wore, so this couldn't be another stupid Anita joke. I reached down and picked up the shoes. They seemed clean. Not like something that had been there for a long time. I heard a quiet voice say, "Put 'em on." And I jumped and dropped the shoes and looked around frantically. Nobody. I searched the cabin and ran through the outside, too. Nobody was there. Or in the attic when I poked my head up and shied my phone around. I went back to the shoes and picked them up. "Try walking in my shoes," Ella whispered, giggling, the lines to an old song that we'd listened to long ago. It was her voice. I had no doubt now. I just couldn't see her. I felt foolish and delusional, but something in her tone made me forget all of that. It felt good to kick off my hiking boots, and unbelievably, the Vans fit me perfectly. I stomped around the floorboards to see if they were real and laughed to myself. A gust of wind struck the side of the cabin. Interrupted, I looked out the window to see that it was much later in the day than I'd realized. Come out, Ella whispered, and I did. The path to the stream was overgrown with vines and briars, but I passed through them faster than I'd ever run the path as a kid. I leaped over the stepping stones and up the far bank, and ran after the clear, high sound of Ella's laughter, up and down ridges, through stands of birch and tamarack, until I realized my vision was going dim. I stooped over the edge of a clearing, hands on knees, panting and sweating. Soon I realized that my vision hadn't gone dim. The sun had gone completely down. Moonlight shone on the meadow, lining the tall grass and the forest trees with silver. "Ella, where are you?" I asked. "Up here," came her whispered answer. I stood looking around the clearing for the first time. At its center, a graceful flight of white wooden steps ascended from the forest floor. They ended abruptly about 30 feet up, attached to nothing. "Don't think twice. Just come up. Come up. Come up," Ella chanted from somewhere I couldn't see. My heart raced. Something was different. The moonlight was too bright, the woods around too dark. The stair runners shimmered as if something moved just under their shiny surface. They called to me, the stairs. "Ella." I didn't know who or how. I didn't know how my feet started moving when I didn't want them to, or why I couldn't pull back once I started climbing. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, go ahead and hit that like button. And for more of Storytime, go ahead and subscribe because we have more stories coming every week. But until then, I'll see you later.